Cole was sitting with his side leaned against the white, dirt-stained wall. He had just been interviewed by Evan Michaels, a man who gave new meaning to the phrase, wolf in sheep's skin. Evan could get under the skin of any one of the 6 test subjects. In fact, he had a specific method for each one. Cole hated him with untamed passion, enough so that he had plans on murdering the man before either one of them could die first. "Are you okay?" A strong, feminine voice asked from the next room. It was Winter, a young woman who also lived as one of the test subjects. Like Cole, Catalina, and the others, she was a dreamer, capable of seeing into other worlds through the eyes of alternate versions of herself. "I'll be fine," Cole answered, but was unsure if he actually believed his own words. He was 36 years old and had been here since shortly before his 30th birthday. Evan had posed as a delivery man and simply tranquilized and kidnapped Cole, bringing him from Michigan to Kansas. Cole was short, Caucasian, and had brown hair and blue eyes. He had been a police officer before his life in the facility, having his dreams viewed on a monitor every single day. Unfortunately for him, he had been on a morning run on one of his days off when Evans located him. With earbuds in his ears, Cole never saw the wolf coming, and Evan delivered him to Dr. Phillips with relative ease. Most of the test subjects have no idea just how Evan or Dr. Phillips caught wind of their dreams, or the fact that they were special, but nonetheless they did. And now Catalina, Cole, Winter, and 3 others were faced with a never-ending life of boredom and dreaming. The former Michigan officer began his dimensional dreaming when he was only 9 years old. Up until just a few years ago, Cole would only ever see worlds that appeared slightly different from this one. Various Earths where certain rock stars and artists didn't die untimely deaths. There were worlds in which Jim Morrison, John Lennon, and even Martin Luther King Jr. managed to grow old and further influence their era. These other worlds were not necessarily better or worse off for it, but they were different in their own small ways. It didn't take long, and Cole began to drift off, desperate to escape the waking world. Of course, Cole was always aware when he was dreaming. All dreamers had this immediate distinction. He could feel that he was in another world. Although everything from air pressure to smell were practically the same, and while he was in a body that was his own, it was not his original. It felt as if he were wearing a raincoat on the driest day of the year. His eyes, although being genetic duplicates, were not his own. He felt as if he were on autopilot while still manning the controls. He could tell that this world was nothing like those he had visited before. There were no parties with Kurt Cobain in the late 2000s. This world had wrote itself a death sentence through science. Man had meddled with DNA and how to splice it with others. Creatures that had been made in a lab managed to overtake their creators and escape, spreading into the outside world like a plague. They multiplied like flies but had the lifespan of a normal, healthy human. They carried multiple children in one pregnancy which only lasted 3 months, allowing them to breed 2 or 3 times a year. It had been 2 years since these things got loose and wreaked havoc all over the Midwest. They tore through one small town after another, nesting in secluded areas where it was hard to find them. What's worse is that the offspring develop into full-grown adults in just 1 month and are ready to breed. Most world governments had fallen after the first year, and those that were left desperately joined into one nation, with a board of directors acting as leaders. This board consisted of former world leaders, military experts, and the wealthiest of the wealthy. The creatures craved living flesh, and ate anything without prejudice, even each other if food became scarce enough. The human population in this world has dwindled to alarming numbers, recently falling beneath the 1 billion mark. Those who suffered bites from the creatures were slowly transformed into them due to a chemical reaction in their saliva. From what Cole could understand, this world was doomed. There were not enough people or firepower to fight them. However, the Cole of this world and people like him were putting themselves at the front lines. Dreamers, evidently, were psychics, and there were many different kinds of them. Some dreamed, while others possessed telekinesis, or the ability to read minds. At the world's bitter, desperate end, these people were no longer shunned, disbelieved, or hunted for study. They were humanity's final soldiers, and they were putting up a much better fight against these monsters than anyone with a gun. There were dozens of men and women who used their abilities to either combat the creatures, save civilians, or even both. Cole was a person who specialized in helping others, often rescuing them from dangerous situations and leading them to safety or taking them to a doctor. There were also medical psychics, those who could perform surgery or give medicine with their abilities. Doctors were calling it psychic surgery, and many people deemed beyond saving were alive today because of it. The world's psychics found each other rather quickly, due to reasons unknown to most, including Cole. They worked with the new One World government and its directors, coordinating survival and formulating strategic attacks in the war. Cole dreamed vividly while in this world, seeing much more than he had in any other realm before it. Later, Dr. Phillips was rewatching the dream on his monitors. He noticed that Cole was much more involved in this world than any he had previously visited. But why? This was similar to how Catalina had been important in the world that she had seen, and the Doctor was beginning to develop a theory. Were these two worlds in fact one and the same? Was Catalina a psychic in this reality, an important cog in the last defense for humanity? Cole had met plenty of people while in his dream, having heard and learned their names. This was exciting, as a few of them were psychics, and bound to exist on this earth as well. Dr. Phillips feverishly wrote down their names in an extra small notepad that he held on his person at all times. Gabriel Bathory, Judy Stein, Autumn Walker, Devin James, Antonio Rivera. Dr. Phillips whispered just a few of the names that he had written down, but there was one in particular that caught his attention. Autumn Walker, a woman who worked as a therapist, was living only a few dozen miles away in Topeka, Kansas. She was in her mid-40s and had been a native to Kansas her entire life. Dr. Phillips wanted to know more about her, as it was unclear whether or not she was a psychic or government personnel. However, what good would a simple therapist be in the midst of an unimaginable war? He watched the dream over and over, analyzing everyone and everything that he saw. Finally, Evan was brought into the doctor's office and seated near the monitors. The doctor's protege sat for a few minutes before the screens flashed on as Dr. Phillips entered the room with a remote. Evan, the doctor said with a nod, and the younger man returned the gesture. Doctor, he murmured and then asked, I've heard that Cole has had quite the dream recently. Is that why I'm here? There was a brief pause as Dr. Phillips shuffled through some papers in a file before inserting a flash drive into the computer next to him. Yes, it is, he finally answered, and Evan's excitement got the better of him. May I see it? He asked in a rushed, anxious tone that Dr. Phillips found quite annoying. I'm downloading certain files from the dream to this flash drive, the doctor explained, ignoring Evan's question. It will have what you need for your next assignment. Evan was quickly briefed on Autumn Walker, the therapist who was alive in the other world. Dr. Phillips had decided that collecting information on the Autumn and their own reality was the best way to learn of the importance in the other. Evan was specifically instructed to observe and learn everything that he could without contact. This disappointed Evan, as he was used to bringing his target back to the facility. In many ways, Evan was a hunter, and Dr. Phillips had asked him to pick up a pair of binoculars instead of his rifle. But the blonde, muscular angel had been given his orders, and he was going to follow them regardless of his opinions or desires. That was the only way he was ever going to get further up the ladder. One day, he would run the facility, and the subjects would be his to study. "You have a few days to collect data," Dr. Phillips told him, and Evan nodded, taking the flash drive and placing it in his pocket. "No teams be on standby," the doctor continued, and then added, "I don't want you spooking anyone prematurely. If you can confirm that she is a psychic, or knows the whereabouts of others, you may notify me and I will give you orders to capture. Do you understand?" "Yes, Dr. Phillips," Evan answered. "I do." Cole was in his cell, thinking hard about the dream he had the night previous. His experience had been both pleasant and terrifying, to say the least. He spent much of the morning praying that such inhuman creatures would never grace the soil of this reality. Of course, he considered the possibility that they already existed in labs somewhere on the planet. Perhaps even Dr. Phillips or Evan knew about it. Maybe, just maybe, such monsters were lurking in cells like his own, hidden within the facility. He was laying in his bed, staring at the concrete ceiling while thinking back to a part of his dream that had surprised him the most. He had been with other psychics, going over strategy plans while preparing for an imminent attack. Once the meeting had come to a close and everyone else had left the room, a woman approached Cole. Her name was Autumn, a former therapist from Kansas. She quickly grabbed his wrist, but in a gentle, concerned sort of way. She was a mix between a brunette and a redhead, and appeared to be in her mid-40s. "May I help you?" Cole asked uneasily. "I know you're not the Cole of this world," the woman spoke casually, and her eyes found his. "You're an alternate, viewing this earth through a dream, yes?" Cole frowned before bowing his head and nodding. "This Cole does the same," the woman revealed, and Cole's eyes widened as she continued, saying, "We call your kind of psychic a dreamer. You're also the most common and have the easiest time mastering your ability." Cole frowned, asking, "You're saying that I can control it?" Autumn smiled and then let him go, saying, "That's exactly what I'm saying." Dr. Martin Phillips was alone in his office. He couldn't help but rewatch Cole's dream over and over. He had never learned so much from a singular dream before. It was as exciting as it was nerve-wracking. The old man hadn't felt such high levels of anxiety since before he arrived to this earth. No matter how long he spent here, the doctor would always recognize the differences between this world and his own. Smells were slightly different, and the air was thicker in his lungs. The gravity was also noticeably different, as he has always had to pretend that he isn't much stronger than everyone else, despite being an older man. But none of these things bothered him as much as the original driving force behind his work. His father, a man named Jonathan Phillips, has been missing since the nuclear strike in their world. What had happened to him? Where did he go? And why hasn't he come looking for his son? It was possible that he had died that same day, and Martin Phillips was simply alone in the multiverse. Perhaps his father had gotten stuck in their world, or simply elected to stay for some reason, perishing with everyone else on the planet. The device that Martin had traveled here with hadn't been invented on this earth, but there was a Jonathan Phillips who existed here. He led a similar life to the Jonathan that fathered Martin, with the exception that he had never met Martin's mother, and therefore the doctor had never been born. Jonathan created the technology to view dreams on a monitor, and was murdered soon after. His death had been considered a great loss to the United States government. Everything that Dr. Phillips had done since waking up in that field in Kansas had been to find his father and get the answers that he so desperately desired. The fact that his father had been murdered in this reality was puzzling to say the least. In fact, it alarmed Dr. Phillips every single time that he thought about it. The man who had followed him that day at school revealed that he desired Jonathan, not the boy. Could there have been a version of him in this world? The idea raised so many questions that Dr. Phillips couldn't handle the stress. He always wondered why he had never encountered such a person in this world, seeing as the threats Jonathan never spoke of existed in this world too. Dr. Phillips sighed and bowed his head, closing his eyes as he stole a few moments of rest to collect his thoughts. What do you mean there's a pattern? Winter's voice traveled just barely enough for Cole to hear. I can feel it, the older man answered, his eyes focused on the camera in the upper corner. Catalina saw the same world I did not too long ago, Cole added. I could feel the dimensional pressure while I was there. More and more worlds are falling into despair. You make it sound as if we're doomed, Winter replied, and Cole breathed deeply, thinking back to his dream. She told me that what I felt was right, Cole said, and Winter frowned in her own cell as she lay on the floor. Who is she? I won't say her name. Cole spoke quickly, and he tried to cover his mouth so that the camera couldn't capture his lips. She's like us, but stronger, Cole explained. She exists in all worlds and coexists with all parallel versions of herself at once. There was an uneasy silence before Winter said, That's too hard to believe, Cole. Well, you have to believe sooner or later, Cole replied, before deciding to tell her, You're much less skeptical in the other world. In fact, you're the only dreamer I know who's capable of so much more. You just have to believe. Cole's eyes narrowed as he noticed a blinking light on the camera. As it zoomed in on him, he realized that Dr. Phillips was recording their conversation. Cole grit his teeth together and sighed, flipping the camera the middle finger and burying his head between his knees.